All right, welcome back. We're going to skip part 2 for now, and we are going on to part 3 from 9.1, which is on page 3. And we are going to separate Rachel and her mom's data and look more closely at their individual data. So Rachel's mom is listed at the top, and Rachel's data is listed at the bottom. The first question says, does either set of data appear to have any outliers, and how can you tell? Looking through Rachel's mom's data, a lot of the numbers seem pretty small. 5.5, 6, 5, 3, 10 is pretty small. But this 150 and the 150 at the beginning, they look a lot bigger than any of the other information in Rachel's mom's data for her texts. So I would say when Rachel's mom asked her friend and they said 150 texts, that would be considered a possible outlier for Rachel's mom's data. So I'm going to label this mom. But within Rachel's set, her numbers all fall within the 100s. I don't see anything that's too low, maybe a 36 on the lower side. But then she does have that 275 as well that we can test and see if that ended up being an outlier. So I'm going to write maybe 306 or 36 as a low, or 275 as a high. And we're not sure about these outliers until we get to number 9 and we actually calculate them. Just looks like these numbers don't fit very well within the rest of the data that they've collected. Number 8 says, if you did identify any outliers above, what effect do these outliers have on the center? So mean and median are the two ways that we measure center. I'm going to skip over spread for now. For mom's data, I already did the average, and her average number of texts was 21.56 that her friend said that they sent, but the median was only 6. Both of these numbers are supposed to be the center, so they're pretty far apart. Let's look at Rachel's data. Her mean, or average, was 139.2 texts, and the median was 144. These numbers seem pretty close together. So if there was an outlier in Rachel's data, it would have pulled her mean or skewed her mean either to the right, which would be higher, or to the left, which would be lower. So it looks like maybe the 36 could have been pulling her average down, but the 275 does not seem to be pulling her average up. With mom's data, it is pretty obvious that the 21.56 average has been skewed by a high outlier. So the 150 in mom's data set does seem to be pulling that mean much higher than the center of the data, literally the middle, which is a median of 6. So let's calculate to find out if these outliers truly are outliers mathematically. There is a rule in math called the 1.5 times the IQR rule for determining a high or low outlier. This is the general setup for how you use the rule, but we're going to break it down into steps. So we're going to look at mom's data and Rachel's data. I've already used my calculator to find the 5-number summary for mom's data and Rachel's data by using StatEdit. And we'll talk about how to do that in class when you guys have your graphing calculator with you. So for mom's data, we're trying to figure out, is the 150 an outlier? The first step is to calculate the IQR. Remember, the IQR is the Q3 minus the Q1. So from the data that I've already found, I'm going to do 15.5 minus 5, which is going to give me 10.5 for my IQR. The second step is to take that number, the IQR, and multiply it by 1.5. Why do we use 1.5? Well, statisticians, I guess, decided that 2 would be too big and 1 doesn't change the number, so 1.5 seemed to be just kind of a happy medium for determining how far away does an outlier really need to be from the data set. So we settled on times 1.5. When I type in 1.5 times 10.5, I get 15.75. This is the number I'm going to use to help me test if the 150 is high enough to be an outlier. So I'm going to start with the Q3 from mom's data, which was 15.5. And I am going to add on this test number, 15.75. And when I add those numbers together, I'm going to get what is called a boundary or a threshold value. That means that if the number is higher than this boundary, it is going to be considered an outlier. So 15.5 plus 15.75 is 31.25. Is the 150 higher than 31.25? Yes. So the 150 is an outlier. Now let's look at Rachel's data. We actually decided that the 275 is probably not an outlier, so we're going to test the lower 36 instead. We're going to start by following the same exact steps. We're going to find the IQR, which is 152.5 minus 133.5, Q1 or Q3 minus Q1. And I'm getting 19 for my IQR. The second step is going to be to take the IQR, 19, and multiply it by 1.5. For this, I'm getting 28.5. Remember, this is the number that I am going to either add on to Q3 to test any higher outliers, and we decided we probably don't have any higher outliers, or we can start with Q1 and subtract this number to test if we have any lower outliers. So Q1 is 133.5, and we are going to subtract the 28.5 that we just got, which gives me 105, which means that is my boundary. So any number that is lower than 105 would be considered an outlier in Rachel's data. So is the 36 an outlier? Yes. There's actually other outliers in Rachel's data as well. Anything below 105 is going to be considered an outlier in Rachel's data. 85 is lower, 70 is lower, and our 36. All of these would be considered lower outliers in Rachel's data. We'll be discussing the IQR rule and some of this other statistics with histograms when you guys return to school on Monday. For now, I want you to work on more of this workbook to see what you understand and what you still have questions about.